llegamos a otra locación bastante importante. Todo lo que significa esta edificación, de verdad que es bastante impresionante. Impresionante.
Hola. Hi, welcome to the James Bonine Carriage House. This was built in 1850, and it is a site on the Underground Railroad. A station, actually, right, Cindy? Yes. The station on the Underground Railroad, because we had freedom seekers stay in the third floor on their way to safety. So that's what makes this a station on the Underground Railroad. You can go through and see what we have, or do you want to look at the whole thing and then come back and then talk about it? I don't know what the best way is for you.
I don't know what's the best.
Okay. Well, we'll just give you a tour then as we go in. Okay. And Cindy, you're better at this than I am. So she has better memory. She has a photographic memory. So we'll have you.
This is the type of wagon they would have used to transport freedom seekers from one station to the next. The freedom seekers would climb into the back of the wagon. The station master and conductor then would put boards on top, put the tailgate on, and put bags of grain or straw on there. So when the slave catchers would see this wagon, they would think that it was fully loaded and not hiding freedom seekers underneath it. In 2010, we purchased the Bonine House in the Carriage House. The Bonine House, it was in worse condition than the Carriage House. And so most of our attention went to the Carriage House. And then we had to come and rescue the Carriage House. The whole west corner, which is here, this west side, this wall was collapsing. So in 2014, they came in and they redid this wall here. And then in 2016 and 2017, our east wall was starting to collapse. And so we called in construction and they came in. We had cribbing done. We had these steel beams running from one side to the other side to hold it up. We thought this little wall was going to be safe. And once they lifted the weight of the carriage house off of the stones started just to fall out, so we had to redo that wall as well. This sleigh is called a lady cutter sleigh. It was designed so the ladies it would be easy for them. All they would have to do is hook up one horse to pull the sleigh. So you know the song Jingle Bells. So you have one horse in an open sleigh. This is a bear blanket, probably done at the Three Rivers Tannery in Three Rivers, Michigan. The sleigh probably was built at the Kalamazoo Sleigh Company. It was donated to us by the St. Joseph County Historical Society. So this would be what all you ladies and girls will be driving in the wintertime.
By A.J. Downing, or it was designed rather. He was an architect, well-known architect of the time. And it's modeled after some of his architectural designs from the 1850s. And that's what's left of the foundation. It's a cobblestone foundation. They call it cobblestones because they're about the size of a softball or baseball, and that's what they use. That was very typical of an 1850 design. And this is a post and beam style construction. So what that means is that you have these beams and posts that come together. They're all hand hewn. You can see the adze. It's like a specialized axe, so you know what an adze is. And that's how they formed these and squared these beams off. and they would mortise and tenon them together, and then they would use pegs to hold them together. They very rarely used nails, or they didn't have screws back in the day, so they would have pegs. Let me show you the pegs. You can see these pegs sticking down here. They'd bore holes, and this piece would go inside here into this beam. They would bore a hole and then put the peg, and the harder they drove the peg in, the tighter those beams would stay together.
Oh, okay.
So that's why this is called post and beam, and it's very typical of 1830s, 1840s, and 1850s design. Some of these beams are actually rounded too, and some of them are square. I believe that they may have salvaged some beams from another building, another barn, another carriage house, and put the pieces together in 1850. A lot of work went into these beams, so they didn't want anything to go to waste. So if they had another building, maybe they disassembled that and then put them back together. These were easy to take apart, move, and put back together because of the way they were designed. So I just wanted to point that out. It's kind of an interesting architectural aspect of it. So this is the second floor of the carriage house, and this type of barn carriage house was a ramp barn. What that means is that there was a ramp of dirt that went from these doors, and you have 3 bays here. Each bay has its own door. So the ramp would come up from where the road is, and it would come up to the second floor. The first floor would have been more of a stables area where they kept the horses. The second floor is where they kept the wagons and the carriage. So the ramp would have come up from the road area, and then it would come up into the second floor here. As they needed their wagons or needed their carriage, they would back them in, maybe fill them with straw or whatnot, and then take them back out whenever they needed it. So that's what this design is. We turned the second floor into a old farm tool museum. And what you see here are various hand tools that were used for farming back in the mid-1800s. A good example is this giant saw here. And this is what they used to cut the lumber with. And it's a two-handed saw, would take 2 people to use, often called a pit saw. And what that would be is where there would be a pit dug in the ground, and a log would be across the pit. One man would be in the pit, and another person would be up on top of the ground, and they would be using the saw with the big 2 handles, with the guy in the pit would be down below sawing the log up above, and the guy up above would be sawing, and that's how they would be able to split a lot of the lumber you see here and saw things into their dimensional lumber to build with. So that's what that is. This would have been a collar for an oxen or a horse perhaps to pull things. We have some old hatchet heads here. These are probably Civil War. I believe these to be much earlier and very primitive. Would have been hand hewn by an individual. And then these are more of a modern, quote modern, Civil War era style axe head. But other things like a plow, you would have hooked up a horse or a donkey or something and would have plowed. This is a sickle that would have been used to harvest hay or wheat. And what's very unique about this one is it still has the tines. These tines are very fragile. As you can see, I need to repair this one. But it's very rare to find them with the tines because those tines are so delicate. But when they would sweep, the wheat would fall right onto the rack, and it was easy to then bundle it together. And so they were able to bundle things as they were cutting things down. Another handheld plow here. You would literally push by yourself. It'd be very difficult. Everything was very, very manual. And there's other tools on this wall that are associated with horses, plowing, We have another sickle up here that doesn't have the rack like I just showed you, but that would be another one. Another style of sickle. Other vintage tools, picks, things like that. Over in this corner, we have a display of women on the farm. And you'll see the spinning wheels here, how they spun yarn to make clothing. You'll have egg crates here, the types of pots and pans and things that were used over an open fire. A little cradle for children. An ironing board. And this is an iron. This is what they used to iron clothes with. And you would set this on a wood stove, and when it got hot, you would use it until it cooled off, and then you'd grab your next one and sit that on, and then you'd have probably 2 of them going to keep them hot enough so you could press your clothes. And then canning jars and other types of things that a woman would use, and the pots, for instance, for cleaning clothes, perhaps cooking. And here we have a display of how the meat processing prior to World War II. And they would take hogs. This would be a lard press, so they would press the fat from a hog and create lard from it. And they'd make pork cracklings from the pork fat, and that was very edible. And that's how they processed different products. This is interesting. This is an oxen training yoke, but it was also used by people to carry water, as you'll see here. These hooks here are for hay making for bank barns, and these hooks, and I will eventually display these and hang them to show people how they work. But you can see the big hooks would come down and grab stacks of hay and either load it onto a wagon or take it from the wagon and then take it into the barn. So that's how they moved hay, processed hay, and moved it in. They didn't have bales back then. Everything was very loose. And so they would use those hooks to grab hold of the straw or the hay and move it from one point to another. Here's some more hand tools from the era. This is what they used to roll logs with. You would literally use this to roll the log. You had a little handheld sickle for some smaller items. I mentioned the pegs, and they would drill holes. This is what they would have used to drill a hole in the beams. So they would use their hammers to hammer the pegs in. This here is a step from a carriage. It would have been on the side of the carriage, and they would have given them a place to step when they were stepping up into the carriage or out of the carriage. Another item of interest. These are draw knives. They call them a draw knife. So you'll have your beam, and you'll start drawing towards you this way to square and level off the log to make a square surface. So it's easier to build with, because we saw some round logs and we saw some of the square logs. Well, this draw knife helps square the logs. Here's a little bench here. This would have been used probably to sit on while you're milking the cow. Oh. Very tiny stool, but not a lot of space there, but it was just a primitive item that would have been made by hand and, of course, and used by the farmer. And a variety of other things. We have another press there that was probably a lard press as well. So you're on the 3rd floor of the carriage house. What makes this carriage house unique is the 3rd floor was built as a residence. So they intended people to live here. And I think the people that would have lived here would have been a carriage driver or a farm hand. And we know it was a residence style level because It's the ceiling, the walls are lath and plaster. And that's what they did with houses to help insulate and keep the air out. It's not just an open barn. It actually had plaster walls. And so that's what you were noticing when you were walking up the steps. That's what that is. They'd put little pieces of lath on the wall and then they would smear it with plaster. And that made it a nice living quarters for people. We also know it was people lived here and cooked here because we have a spot, flue for a cook stove or heat stove. And so there would have been a stove sitting here and then the pipe would have dumped out into the chimney. So that's also evidence that people would have lived here. But what makes this unique is this is a station on the Underground Railroad. This is where the freedom seekers would have stayed, allowing James Bonine allowing them to stay here until it was safe for them to move on to the next station, which would have been Schoolcraft, possibly Nathan Thomas home and other areas. So they would have stayed here, making this a station. What you see here is a lantern that Cindy mentioned earlier, that this lantern would have been put in the window to tell people who were out coming this way that it was either safe or not to enter. Mary Charlotte Bonine, she grew up here, and her grandmother told her that when they moved here in 1934 that there were cots and food and clothes in these rooms. And and this is where we got the story of the Red Railroad lantern. And also this field down there by just past the big power pole was Ramp Town. And the story of Ramp Town is James Bonine bought a section of land and he allowed freedom seekers and free blacks to live there. And they could work the land, they made money, they could send their kids to school, they went to church, and they would often use that money to buy property. What makes our story very unique is not everybody left. People that were coming up from the south and a lot of the free blacks that were in the area or other areas, they decided to settle here. It makes our story very unique because people decided to stay here, and it changed the culture of Cass County. And still to this day, we have families that lived here for generations now. And so that makes this area of Calvin Township, Penn Township, Porter Township very unique because a lot of those people, their families are still here. So it wasn't just Quakers and other abolitionists that settled, but also the freedom seekers and free blacks and other families associated with the Underground Railroad. And what's very interesting too, we discovered here in the last couple of years is that the plat map, we have plat maps of who owned what land, and the 1860 plat map shows 100 black families owned farmland here in Cass County. Now imagine that. This is before and during the Civil War, we had black families that were purchasing farmland and starting their own farms. So you wouldn't think that that happened until after the Civil War, but up here it was safe enough. It still was a little scary up here for people, but it was safe enough that they were able to own land even before and during the Civil War. So that's an important factor about our story. So we'll come into this room here. We found these artifacts when we started salvaging the carriage house. And most of these are kitchen artifacts that have been here for generations. And you'll see the various tools that would have been used mostly in the kitchen. Some of these, this is used to husk corn. Some of these other items are graters and things like that. This is what the farm looked like probably in the 1940s. This is where we're at right here on the third floor. Okay. And there used to be a big barn here, which is now, it's been torn down years and years ago. But that's what the farm looked like on this side of the road. This is the carriage house here. We're on the third floor. In front was a gas station, kind of a convenience store back in the 1940s, 1950s. And that ran through the 1960s where they would sell gasoline. One of the first televisions were here. They had a potbelly stove and ring bologna. And a lot of the local farmers would come in and sit down and they would watch boxing on their TV and drink their 7-ounce bottles of Coca-Cola, things like that. So there was kind of a service area, you know, about the time the highway department started, and people would come in and stop in and visit and get gas and things like that. The people at the time were also Oliver tractor dealers. So this was an Oliver tractor dealership, and they would work on tractors and things like that. So that's what we see here. There's some old bottles we found too in the closet here. And that's a meat grinder on the shelf. That's how they would grind the meat and things. And some interesting items. This is the type of cot that was found. Now this doesn't date to the 1800s, but this would have been a little, it's a little newer, but this was definitely used as a place to sleep. We'll be adding more displays too. Another example of a flue area where a heating stove would have been here. This would have been more like the master bedroom area, master living area probably. So another little heat stove, wood stove would have been here. So. Yeah, we don't have anything in here, but you're welcome to take a look. Now this ceiling was dropped. So this is modern drywall. About the 1960s, the Chamberlain family lived up here, and they ran the store that I just talked about. So in order to keep it a little warmer, they dropped the ceiling. There would have been drywall on this. But what you see above is the original lath, and that would have been the lath and plaster ceiling that I had mentioned earlier. So that's what you're seeing here is a more modern construction that was put in around 1960 or so. We have one more room over here, and this highlights the era of the mid-1900s when, as I mentioned, some of our families that were Underground Railroad families actually started their own businesses. So the Lawson family is a good example of a family associated as a freedom-seeking or free black family that started their own business. And the Lawsons opened their garage in 1940, and that garage ran until 1993. And there were several families that owned various businesses in this area. So that's what this is. More artifacts that we were found here. Like I said, the Oliver tractor, they sold wiper blades, things like that in the store. And that's a hand towel because there were bathrooms attached to the store. So when people were on their road trip, they would have an opportunity to get gas and then use the restroom. And another picture of the farm. And they sold diesel for their tractors. And so some of these signs, they were original to the store. And people would wash their clothes here. I believe there was a bathtub here. This looks like piping for a bathtub, so there would have been a clawfoot tub here. And would have washed their clothes here and hung them on this line, these lines. So. Yeah, Calvin Auto, they did implement painters, so they would paint tractors. See, we paint farm equipment at Calvin Auto. So another business that sprung up in the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, and it's a legacy of the Underground Railroad. It gave people an opportunity to have a life here and start their own businesses. And that's kind of the holy grail of sorts. Everybody asks about tunnels. And we've heard stories about tunnels being found, but we've not found any ourselves. So I think that there were tunnels in some areas that were used because it was illegal to help freedom seekers. And so they didn't want to have them in their homes because people could lose their homes. But there would have been tunnels from one barn to the next barn, or from the carriage house to another barn. We haven't found any, so I can't say that we've actually seen any. But there was a description of, in the 1950s when they were building M60 highway, that there was a tunnel that ran from the Bogue house that you're familiar with across the street to the barn. So there's a possibility that that tunnel may have been used, but we don't know for sure, so we can't say. But yeah, there were other secret rooms and things. The Bogue House is where Perry Sanford, he hid up in the attic. And so we do know that attics were used often to hide freedom seekers. And Cindy will tell you more about that when you go to the Bogue House, and how the Mrs. Bogue would use her spinning wheel to create noise to help hide the people that were up in the attic. So you'll get to see that attic, and it's a pretty special place in there. So yeah, you'll get to see that. But we haven't found any other secret passages or secret rooms here. But I do understand, and you've been to the Nathan Thomas house, that he had a secret kind of an attic or secret room. So I'm sure those were used quite a bit. We just haven't found it yet.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
everyone asks. So yeah, it's one of those things we would love to find someday.
Okay.
So
Bueno, ahí tienen la explicación de Mike sobre los túneles secretos y todos los mitos que envuelven eso. Bueno, la verdad que estoy bastante impresionado con todo esto y bueno, gracias.
gracias,
Mike,
thank you.
por tu ayuda, por este recorrido. La verdad que
Appreciate
es
it.
bastante impresionante poder escuchar de primera mano personas que prácticamente están al cuidado de todo esto, de toda esta historia, de mantener esto y que no se pierda esta parte de la historia, y de verdad que mantener este lugar y bueno, todo el tiempo de verdad que nos ofrecieron ahorita Mike, Cindy, de verdad que lo aprecio mucho y bueno, gracias.